This is the Alfa Romeo Giulia, the Italian firm's take on the compact executive saloon, putting it in competition with monumentally successful cars like the Audi A4, the BMW 3 Series and the Mercedes C-Class. It's been around since 2017, so it's not a new thing, and even when it was fresh out the box, it was just a teeny tiny little bit flawed. It was a left field and likeable alternative to its German rivals, but at the same time it wasn't quite as polished in a number of ways, and so it wasn't quite as convincing as a result. Close, but not quite there. However, the car has now been freshly facelifted for 2023, so work has been done to polish up all those little areas in which the Giulia was slightly behind the rest. So, can this raft of small improvements conspire to make the Giulia as convincing as it needs to be? Well, the first question has to be, what's changed? Well, there have been some visual ones. This triangular grille has long been a staple Alfa design feature, but these intakes either side have been restyled to accentuate the bit in the middle. The headlights also gain the same three-element design signature seen on the Tonale SUV. The rear lights have changed too, with a different LED layout and a smoked central lens. In terms of practicality, the news is mixed. In terms of boot capacity, it's actually quite competitive with those of its rivals. However, with this load lip and access that's both shallow and narrow, you might struggle more to get your cargo in. And unlike its rivals, it's not available as an estate for more practicality. On the upside, the rear seats have a similar amount of room to what you get in rivals, so a pair of gangly passengers will be just as happy. But when you're required to fold them down, you're left with this oddly shaped aperture to load through. There are more changes in here, most notably right in front of you, where the analog dials have been replaced by a digital screen, much like the one you'll find in the Alfa Romeo Tonale. The layout can be adjusted in 3 different ways depending on which nuggets of information you wish to prioritise, but in truth the layouts don't actually change all that much. The central infotainment screen doesn't look much different to before, but this too has received some attention. It now supports over-the-air software updates, for instance, as well as the ability to operate some functions via a smartphone app. It's not the most intuitive system you'll ever come across, and the screen looks rather small by modern standards, but it's nice that you have physical aircon controls rather than having to delve into on-screen menus. Otherwise, it's very much as you were in here. The design is appealingly different and the quality is generally very nice, but there are 1 or 2 little bits that let the side down, and even those that don't aren't quite as plush as they are in the German rivals. One thing that hasn't changed is how the car drives, and that is because virtually nothing has been done to the mechanicals. Well, that's not actually strictly true, because one of the 2-litre turbocharged petrol engines that was previously available has now been dropped, that being the 200 horsepower version, leaving only this one, the 280 horsepower version, as the only engine available. It's pretty good too. It has plenty of low and mid-range punch, just as the power output suggests it would, even if it might not always feel like 280 horses worth. It works quite nicely with the standard 8-speed automatic gearbox, and it even sounds quite naughty when you extend it, enhancing the car's sporty feel. And so does the ride, which does have a distinctly firm edge to it, although it is still easily comfortable enough to keep you and your passengers happy on pretty much any kind of surface. And so too, for that matter, does the steering, although sadly not in quite such a positive way. The first thing you notice about it is that it's super quick and super responsive, which sounds brilliant, right? The thing is, it's also quite light, regardless of which of the various driving modes you select, and that combination of characteristics can make the car feel decidedly twitchy when you're pressing on. It's all too easy to overdo your inputs at the first time of asking, and then you have to correct them, and all of that has a distinctly unsettling effect on the handling. Which is a little bit of a shame, because otherwise the handling feels very neat indeed. There's very little body lean as you change direction, and because it's rear wheel drive, there's naturally a very balanced, very poised feel. This particular car also happens to be the high-end Veloce version, which comes as standard with the Q2 mechanical limited slip differential on the rear axle. And sure enough, there is absolutely tons of grip on offer, and at both ends of the car. So, the Giulia still doesn't have the dynamic precision of a 3 Series, the cosseting comfort of a C-Class, or the sumptuous quality of an A4. And although many of the changes made to the Giulia are reasonably welcome, they aren't numerous enough nor significant enough to fundamentally change the car's standing in the class of being an interesting but still ultimately out there choice. That said, just like it always was, the Giulia is still a very likeable car that does a very decent job when judged in isolation. So, if you've fallen in love with the way it looks, and let's face it, why wouldn't you, then there is absolutely no reason not to go ahead and buy one.